All right, well, what's going on, everyone? And welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we generally look at theories of everything and all-encompassing theories that can help you with your life, with your uh, forging a new paradigm, um, helping you obtain a holistic view of the world and putting the pieces together. Today is our 373rd video on Dewey B. Larson's reciprocal system of theory. Mr. Larson was an engineer in the 20th century, and he had some novel ideas about the nature of our reality and our universe. And he took those ideas and he wrapped them up into two fundamental postulates that he put out about 1959. And then from there, took those postulates and through a process of deduction, he was able to arrive at his theoretical universe. So it's really the universe that comes out of just from his theory. If this, then that. If this, then that. If this, then that. And I did do about 15 videos on that much earlier, almost a year ago. And those are called the outline of the deductive development of the reciprocal system. Let me just, this has happened twice, 2 days in a row here. And yeah, the outline of the deductive development of the reciprocal system. So if you want to check those 15 videos out, please do. Also, he took those, that deduction, that theoretical universe, and he arrived at the substance for his books. In his books, he compares his theoretical universe with the so-called actual universe that was discovered, measured, observed, and compiled by the legacy scientists. So kind of the mainstream scientific worldview. And in many cases, Larson was able to recreate the practically exact tables from the scientists that they painstakingly measured in their laboratories. Larson was able to pluck those same numbers right out of the air because he was using a theory that was accurate and that really expressed how the universe actually works. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to do that. Now, you could say that he's just fudging the numbers or, it's just a scam. That's possible. It doesn't seem that way just from me going over it, but I'm no expert. So maybe Larson's pulling the wool over our eyes. I highly doubt it. But that's probably the best explanation other than he actually is correct. And in many cases, when he does have answers that differ from the legacy scientists, his answers turn out to be better, and he's able to show why their answers are wrong. And in many cases, he does have corrections for their answers when they're dealing with Newtonian, the Newtonian universe, in the same way as Einstein. He has better proposals in terms of the realms of the very small, the very large, and the very fast, the relativistic areas that Newtonian mechanics just didn't really cover. but that Einstein came along and tried to uh, come up with um, band-aids for those areas. And Larson's band-aids work out a lot better than Einstein's, because Einstein was really dealing with more of a pragmatic situation where he's trying to get the right answers, but he doesn't have the right questions. So he maybe comes up with he borrows math from other people and comes up with the answers that he's looking for, but he doesn't know why. Larson is based in concepts and in the theory, and so he not only comes up with usually the same equation that Einstein had come up with, but he can tell you why that equation is what it is, based on his theoretical understanding of the universe. So it's a very interesting study. Now, after Larson wrote many books and many articles, he had a little journal called Reciprocity that put out papers by Larson and by many of Larson's adherents for many years. Larson passed away in 1990, and a few researchers have kept up the fight, kept putting things out. One of the foremost was Dr. Bruce Peret, who also passed away sadly in 2020, but not before he put out a great body of work and did some yeoman's work in terms of crafting what he calls RS2, the re-evaluation of the reciprocal system, updating the reciprocal system with by dipping into new fields and dipping into areas that Larson didn't, and being able to improve the theory that way, and also staying within the spirit of the theory. So Peret added in all kinds of other areas that Larson either didn't know about or didn't feel like it would be useful to use them in the theory because it might complicate things even more, such as projective geometry. Larson was steadfast in trying to use Euclidean geometry because it was more or less more convenient. And while Euclidean geometry is a subset of projective geometry, projective geometry is more inclusive and covers more territory, and therefore Peret was able to actually use the projective geometry to obviate the need for several of Larson's metaphysical postulates. Larson's two fundamental postulates really only cover the physical universe. But once we get beyond the physical to the metaphysical, the mental and life and ethical phenomena, then Larson has to propose 4 new postulates to cover those areas. And by including projective geometry and denying Euclidean, denying commutative mathematics and primary magnitudes, as those are all parts of Larson's second fundamental postulate, Peret was able to get rid of those 4 metaphysical postulates of Larson. So I think that kind of demonstrates that he was onto something. Now, the basic idea behind Larson's system, and so Peret used that, and he also used things like ancient folklore and science fiction and linguistics and also Taoist philosophy. And that's what we're going to look at today, is an article that Peret wrote called The Tao of Larson. And let's just quickly go over Larson's first fundamental postulate, which is by far the more important of the two. And like I said, the second one, Peret was really not on board with the second one anyway. And he changed the geometry and the mathematics and the magnitudes of the second one. But the first postulate, which is primary, is that the universe is composed of entirely of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. So that's it. The universe is made out of motion, not matter, not energy, not force, nor anything else, but motion. Energy, matter, and force are really 3 separate kinds of motion, as are any of the other scientific quantities that we're talking about. They all can be expressed in fractions, with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. But space or time can have multiple dimensions as well in those fractions. And so the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Motion is basically a fraction with space or time as the numerator, time or space as the denominator. Motion has really, it is a scalar motion. This is a motion that has a magnitude but has no specific direction. That's the fundamental motion that Larson is referring to, not vectorial motion that has a vector, a direction, but scalar motion, which you can envision using a balloon with dots on it. If you blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. And really all of the locations on the balloon are moving away from each other. And that motion is a scalar motion. There's no specific direction that they are moving away from each other. Each location is moving away from each other location. And you can also kind of find that in time. Time is always getting later and later and later and later. But it's not getting later in any specific direction. So that's what Larson refers to as clock time and clock space. Clock space is that everything, all the locations are moving away from each other, farther and farther and farther apart. So in time, it's later and later and later and later. In space, it's farther and farther and farther apart. And then Larson also has coordinate time and coordinate space, which is that space and time have a 3-dimensional aspect. We can see that in space, XYZ coordinates or volume, XYZ coordinates, and we can observe that as far as space is concerned. And since space and time are reciprocals of each other, all reciprocals have the identical qualities. And so we can also posit that time has 3 dimensions as well. So Larson refers to that as coordinate space and coordinate time. And then space and time come only in discrete units. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. If you don't have a full unit, then you don't have that entity. And if you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, space over time being motion, being speed, the bicycle is moving 15 miles per hour. 15 miles of space and 1 hour of time, space over time. Then you have one unit of space per 1 unit of time is the speed of light. Larson refers to this as unit speed, and he refers to this as the progression of the natural reference system, or the null point, the 0 point, the state of rest of this universe. So when you perceive absolute nothingness and absolute stillness, what you're perceiving is the progression of the natural reference system, which is outward motion and all directions at the speed of light. That is the 0 point, which equals 1. 1 over 1 equals 1, unit speed. This is also characteristic of reciprocals. The center of all reciprocals is 1. Anytime you have a reciprocal and you multiply it by its counterpart, you get 1. The reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. 4 over 1 and 1 over 4. They have the identical qualities, except they are in reverse order. And when you multiply them together, you get 1. So 1 is the center of a reciprocal system. And, whereas in legacy science, you've got 0 at the center, motionless, and you measure from that datum, from that 0 point. But in Larson's system, you measure from the unit datum, the speed of light outward in all directions. That means that half of the universe is moving faster than the speed of light, and half is moving slower. Larson refers to these as the cosmic sector and the material sector. This will all be relevant as we move through the Tao of Larson. This article by Dr. Bruce Peret called The Tao of Larson. All right, let's start it up here. When people first look at Larson's publications concerning the reciprocal system, the RS, they find a conceptually different model from what they have been taught all their life and think it is something new and courageous. But when you take a detailed look at what Larson proposes for his theory, it is actually nothing more than an ancient philosophy, that of yin and yang. Using modern scientific terms, yang is replaced by space and yin by time. One of the elementary principles of yin-yang is that yin can never be separated from yang. Larson says the same thing, but with a more mathematical jargon. Space and time are the aspects of the ratio of motion. Peret uses the term ratio, and I've been using the term fraction, but it amounts to the same thing, as far as I can tell. So space and time are the aspects of the ratio of motion. You cannot have a ratio without both a numerator and denominator. So I think he's saying the same thing. Fraction. That's what a fraction is. A universe based on the concept of motion is the Tao of Larson. As an overview, let us make a comparison of the Tajitu, yin-yang symbol, which I've attempted to insert into this video, but it's also the thumbnail for this video. The yin-yang symbol to the concepts that Larson uses in his universe of motion, described in the book Nothing But Motion. Okay, and so we see the Tajitu, the familiar yin-yang symbol with the 2 dots on it, and the squiggly line, wave-like line between the white and the black areas. And he's got some arrows pointing at various things. So the black dot within the white space, he's pointing at the unit speed boundary, and this is called the time region. Now, like I said, the squiggly line is really the speed of light, and that is separating the material sector and the cosmic sector. But that's not the only boundary. The other boundaries are the units. Other unit boundaries, unit space and unit time. So there's three boundaries: the unit speed boundary, the unit space boundary, and the unit time boundary. And this comes out of the discrete unit postulate. The universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. The universe is composed entirely of motion, existing in 3 dimensions in discrete units. So when you have the discrete unit postulate, you have to have at least 1 unit of space, and you have to have at least 1 unit of time. If you don't have a full unit of space, then you don't have space, and you only have time. And that's why that black dot there is called the time region, because this is inside a unit of space. If you don't have 1 unit of space, you don't have space, so you just have time. And the white dot within the black is also the same. It's unit time boundary. If you don't have a full unit of time, then you only have space. And that is the white dot that is within the black area. The black area is the cosmic sector, and the white dot within it is called the space region. Okay, and so the white area is called the large white area is called the material sector. And this, he says, 3D linear space and 3D rotational time. This is the 3D linear space is what Larson calls coordinate space. And the rotational time is what Larson would have called clock time. And then we also have the cosmic sector. That's coordinate time and clock space. So again, the material sector and the cosmic sector are identical, except for the reversal of the roles of space and time. Same is true with the time region and the space region. They are identical except for the reversal of the roles of time and space. And then again, we have the unit speed boundary, the speed of light. It is the border between these 2 larger regions. Okay, now Peret will probably explain this here. The yin-yang symbol has 4 distinct regions separated by 3 boundaries within its circle of completeness, total of 7 parts. White ordinarily represents yang and equates to space, whereas yin is black, the reciprocal of time, the reciprocal aspect of time. Just looking at the symbol, one can see both macroscopic and microscopic versions of those aspects interpenetrating each other. Larson does exactly the same thing. 4 regions defining where motion takes place, contained by 3 boundaries to create his completeness of the universe of motion. The design itself indicates that the interaction between the 2 aspects, yin-yang, space-time, is dynamic and appears to be spinning, suggesting the idea of rotational cycles are at the heart of everything. Scalar rotations defines all structure, particles and atoms, in the reciprocal system. Now, bear in mind that this part here is really RS2. I don't know that Larson would have included this in his analysis here. I think this is a contribution of Dr. Peret. Also, the boundary between yin-yang is not straight, but curved like a wave, suggesting that when space and time rotate, waveforms are being produced in much the same way that air and water interact to produce surface waves. The reciprocal system breaks the universe into 2 halves or sectors. This boundary, that wavy line between the yin time, and the yang, space, aspects, is called the unit speed boundary, known to modern science as the speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second, or usually rounded up to 300 million meters per second. Larson, however, does not use conventional units like meters and seconds. He uses natural units, making the unit speed boundary unity, or one natural unit of space per one natural unit of time. This unit boundary forms the reference speed from which all other speeds are measured, whether they be less than unity, sublight speed, and part of the material sector, or greater than unity, faster than light speed, and part of the cosmic sector. Unity is the natural datum of the reciprocal system, the end of the tape measure that you hook onto things to determine distances. In the case of the reciprocal system, this deviation from the speed of light is called a displacement from unit speed. So that's a term that Larson uses, in his measurement from the speed of light, displacements. Splitting one big empty universe into two empty halves of space and time does not really accomplish a lot, because neither half has any structure. This is where the other two boundaries come into play, with the smaller opposite aspect circles containing the aspects of yin and yang. When the microcosm of one aspect intrudes into the macrocosm of the other, something happens. We get structure in the form of photons, particles, and atoms. Larson expresses the differences between the macrocosm and microcosm as geometry, separated from each other by a spherical unit boundary, which is circular on the 2D drawing of yin-yang. The macrocosm is translational. It moves in one-dimensional straight lines, just as Sir Isaac Newton observed. Translational or linear motion is unbounded in that there is no fixed point, no fixed end point. It can go on and on to infinity. It is defined by the first power of the speed, velocity. The macrocosm is rotational. It moves in a circle, like a satellite orbiting the Earth. Rotational motion is bounded. There is a fixed endpoint, which coincides with the start point. It can go round and round for an eternity, the temporal analog of infinity, but always follows the same path. It is defined by the second power of speed, orbital speed, or v squared. And now that is definitely an innovation of Dr. Peret and not orthodox Larsonianism. When a yang spatial macrocosm contains a yin or temporal microcosm, Larson calls that boundary the unit space boundary, because within a natural natural datum of unity, you cannot have less than one unit of space. But you can have more than one unit of time in the other aspect. So even though you can have more time in that region, you can only have a single unit of space, hence unit space. This is represented by the small black yin circle within the larger white region. This defines the structure of matter. The opposite is also true. Yin temporal macrocosm can contain yang spatial microcosm, separated by the unit time boundary. the small white circle in the larger black field. This defines the structure of antimatter, or what Larson calls cosmic matter. In conclusion, the Tajitu symbol is a complete description of a universe of motion. The little round rotational microcosm contains bounded structure present at a location in the translational macrocosm of the opposite aspect. Together, these four regions with three boundaries define the physical universe by the Tao of Larson. All right, that is the end of that article, The Tao of Larson by Dr. Bruce Peret. And I think that is worthy of your consideration, and maybe gives you kind of a different viewpoint that points out that the ancients had these same ideas, came up with an identical symbol to express exactly what Larson was talking about. And that makes it even more interesting. So thanks for tuning in today. Tune in tomorrow, and we'll get into another similar topic. And have a great day.